This is Lesson 8, Improvising. Sustaining conversation is a creative skill more than a logical skill. It requires making connections between two different ideas or objects. For example, your dog reminds me of this friend I had in grade school. Or, that's funny, one time when I was on a trip to California, or, that's so cool that you did that. I always wanted to learn an instrument, but I was always too busy with sports. I played such and such. Below you'll find a word generator, which we'll be using a lot throughout the program. What it does is it generates a word at random, and what you have to do is speak for 1 minute straight about the word that's generated. Relate it to something in your own life. What you say must be true or honest. Now get creative. The bigger stretch you make between the two things, the more interesting conversation you can create. For instance, the word bird, you don't have to just talk about birds. You can talk about Larry Bird. You can talk about the Hitchcock movie, Birds, the time your cat killed a pet bird, or giving somebody the bird when you were mad at them. For instance, cake batter. I just saw this word. Just came up. When I was young, I was in Boy Scouts, and we had some sort of fundraising event for like charities or local charities. I don't even remember what. But my dad and I had to make a cake together. And my dad's a horrible cook, and I was like 12 years old, so obviously I had no idea what I was doing either. And we were forced to, we stayed up all night screwing up this cake over and over and over again, and there was just cake batter just strewn all about the kitchen, and it became this terrible mess, and the cake that ended up coming out was just like so disgusting and hideous that we ended up taking it to the Boy Scout function and just buying our own cake from the function because we were too embarrassed. Like, we knew that nobody else was going to buy it, and we were too embarrassed to keep it out on the table. So that's the only time I've ever baked a cake, and maybe I've always had a very strong aversion to cooking, and perhaps there's some sort of like childhood trauma going on there that's just always kept me away from the kitchen for some reason, because the few experiences I had when I was a kid, it just did not go well. But I guess my dad and I did have a lot of fun, and we laughed a lot about it. And we ate the cake, strangely enough. So I guess there was that. Here's another one, telephone. Telephone, you could talk about, I had a lot of trouble buying a cell phone when I moved to Brazil. I think that you could talk about how the iPhone is overpriced and overmarketed. You could talk about how nobody leaves messages on answering machines anymore, how everybody just texts now. You could talk about that Lady Gaga song, Telephone. You could talk about that game that you used to play in grade school of telephone. You're kind of getting the idea now. The idea is to just rapidly think of something and just start talking about it at random and just jump from one topic to the next, to the next, to the next, having to do with that word. Do it for a full minute. Garage, same thing. You could talk about an auto repair shop. You could talk about your garage back home, some like game you and your brother used to play in the garage. You could talk about fixing up your garage right now, etc., etc. So, now that you get it, do 1 minute on each word. Go until you feel like you can fill the entire minute comfortably. Be as creative as possible. I want you to keep doing this exercise over and over and over. It doesn't matter what you talk about, it just has to relate to the word. And you have to be immediate. You can't sit there and think about it for 20 seconds and then come through and tell a story or whatever. Be honest with yourself. Do it until it becomes very easy to just call up ideas and names and stories without having to think too much about it. Write down 3 of your examples.